I'm gonna be watching Xi Jinping's 2026 New Year speech to see if there's anything significant here. I haven't seen it at all. It could be pretty interesting.
女士们、先生们，大家好！岁序更替，华章日新。在新年到来之际，我在北京向大家致以美好的祝福。
This was AI generated.
2025年是“十四五”收官之年，5年来，我们踔厉奋发，勇毅前行，克服重重困难挑战，圆满完成目标任务，在中国式现代化新征程上迈出了稳健步伐。我国经济
Can I
总量
pause it? Um, I forgot the specifics, but if I remember correctly, China's previous 5-year plan was it was aimed at production of solar AI, mainly renewable energy. We saw those big forestations where China's like building these plants for turning deserts into habitable spaces for like trees and stuff like that. Using the desert to build their renewable energies, their energy grids, expanding their energy grid. Like China's energy grid has been like drastically expanding, mainly because like they're like focusing on you know, one of the sectors they're focusing on is AI, and AI needs a lot of energy. Um, so they've been expanding their energy production. That was a part of the previous 5-year plan. AI was part of the previous 5-year plan, but the Chinese government's like main goal is going to be focused at reducing the economic inequality in China. That's going to be the main focus of the Chinese government, and considering that their previous 5-year plans and under the leadership of Xi Jinping has been fairly successful in many regards, it's highly likely that they'll achieve their goals, which is reducing poverty, reducing inequality. They've been trying to do that in the rural countries, or the rural parts of China, which are obviously going to be less economically developed, especially in the United States. You see the rural areas a lot less developed, and in some ways they're actually in recession, by the way. While the cities, cities are the only places where economic activity is very productive, so they benefit a lot. But yeah, but not the same. Not probably not the same way in China, but because everybody's living standards are rising and ours are falling. Um, but anyways, the 5-year plan is going to be tackling at inequality and stuff like that. So they're probably going to be talking a little bit about that. But yeah, the renewable parts, like they've had a lot of success there. Especially in regards to AI, if they want to like use those robots that they've been building building up, like they're going to need a lot of energy. The US is doing the opposite. For some reason, they think the energy grid can sustain AI when they're not developing energy. Like the US is not developing energy. They don't have a centrally planned economy to develop energy, or do they have the willingness to even develop that said energy production, despite the fact that like the US is rich. It's a rich country. They just don't want to do it. I don't understand how they expect to for the energy grids to like sustain the level of um electricity production, water consumption that like it's already consumed to the point. They're not doing what China's doing, which China's been very successful, and I think that like if the US was going to like move towards the more advanced sectors like AI, they should at least develop some form of centrally planned uh direction similar to what China did towards producing renewable resources uh in regards to like solar panels. Like there's like the big thing about capitalism where you need to make a profit, Uh, if it's not profitable, they're not going to invest in it. If solar is not as profitable as like oil or gas, it's not going to be they're not going to invest in it, which is going to lead to I don't know where I'm going to put it, but the chart of energy production just being freaking flat, basically flat, while they're just massively increasing the consumption of energy and water. But yeah, let's keep going. Yeah, keep going.
连续跨越新关口，今年预计达到140万亿元，经济实力、科技实力万亿元。
140 trillion.
今年
What?
连续跨越新关口
Economic output.
今年预计达到140万亿元。
That's a lot of money.
经济实
140
力、
trillion.
科技实力、国防实力、综合国力跃上新台阶，绿水青山成为亮丽底色，人民群众获得感、幸福感、安全感不断增强。5年历程极不寻常，成绩来之不易。大家拼搏进取，耕耘奉献，铸就了欣欣向荣的中国。我向每一位辛勤付出的奋斗者致敬。这一年，令人难忘的是，我们隆重纪念中国人民抗日战争及世界反法西斯战争胜利80周年，设立台湾光复纪念日。国之盛典威武雄壮，胜利荣光永载史册。
That car is fucking
激励
crazy.
中华
Yeah,
人
that
民
car is lit.
铭记
Yeah, I rock
历
with that
史，
car so much.
缅怀先烈，珍爱和平，开创未来，凝聚起中华民族伟大复兴的磅礴伟力。我们依靠创新为高质量发展赋能，科技与产业深度融合，创新成果竞相涌现。人工智能大模型你追我赶，芯片自主研发有了新突破，我国成为创新力上升最快的经济体之一。天问2号开启追星之旅，亚夏水电工程开工建设，首艘电磁弹射型航母正式入列。人形机器人亮出功夫模式，无人机演绎绚丽烟花，创新创造催生了新质生产力，也让生活更加多姿多彩。我们以文化滋养精神家园，文博热、非遗热不断升温，世界遗产再添新元。悟空和哪吒风靡全球，古韵国风成为年轻人眼中的顶流审美。文旅市场人气火爆，城超、村超热闹非凡。冰雪运动点燃冬日激情，传统与现代交融，中华文化绽放更加灿烂的光芒。我们共创共享。
Yeah, I will say that, like, China's, at least from what I've seen, it's a very conservative place. They have a lot of, national pride in its own, like, cultural events. Like the anti-fascist war of World War II against Japan. They have raising the Chinese flag for the national flag. These are like big events that China's always had, and its cultural background, and even to see them develop in other realms, like or at least to see it for me to see the development of like you know various forms of entertainment being developed. I never played Wukong or whatever, but it was pretty popular. So Wukong was pretty popular. The light shows, um, they blew up on the internet. They're very popular. People like seeing them and stuff like that. I think it was pretty cool. So they have a lot of like cultural achievements, and uh, especially from the time of the Chinese Revolution. Um, especially from the Chinese Revolution, they have a lot of development in many ways. Um, yeah, I mean, like technological advancements. I mean, it's crazy because like it's literally like every single day, you know, every single day. Like I'll just be like in college or whatever, doing some assignment or whatever, and I'm reading up, doing some American news, and it's just you know how our president is diddling kids, or how our president is protecting the people who are diddling kids, and it's and I go to China, and I look at, and some Chinese news source pops up, or some Chinese like media pops up, and it's China learns how to turn windows into solar panels. China learns how to uh, uh, identify some form of cancer or whatever. Like you see all these like technological advancements while fucking countries is dominated by people who are protecting um, weirdos and traffickers, and it's a very opposite um, outlook. To be fair though, like I do feel like the U.S. is a lot less boisterous. We boast a lot less about our technological achievements. I feel like because I usually like especially around like medicine. I mean, you'll see it like advertised, you'll see certain stuff advertised or whatever. But you won't see it like appreciated a lot. Maybe that's just medicine. I mean, I can't really think of like many like technological advancements, like modern technological advancements that like people really appreciate a lot. And I wonder if that's like because there's definitely been some, like there has to have been something, but like it's pointed out a lot less. Like it's never like covered a lot in the news, like or it's not like the main thing. It's always like some like other nonsense. So it is kind of interesting to see him, talking about their own achievements. You don't see presidents doing that, which they probably should, low key. Like America has a lot of achievements.
享美好生活。我到西藏、新疆出席庆祝活动，从雪域高原到天山南北，各族群众心手相连，像16子一样紧紧抱在一起。大家用洁白的哈达、热情的歌舞，表达对祖国的热爱、对幸福的礼赞。民生无小事，枝叶总关情。过去1年，新就业群体权益有了进一步保障，适老化改造给老年人带来方便，育儿家庭每月多了300元补贴，柴米油盐3餐4季，每个小家
Go backwards.
每月多了300元补贴，柴米油盐3餐4季，每个小家热气腾腾，中国这个大家就蒸蒸日上。我们继续敞开胸怀，拥抱世界。
China still does have, before they keep going, like China does still have issues with youth unemployment, which technically every country is having, or a lot of majorly industrialized countries are having problems with youth unemployment. But China definitely is having issues with youth unemployment. I do remember reading how like one of the sectors China is like not as progressed in is commercial aircraft, which is, um commercial travel for airlines and stuff like that, like which, like China just still has some things to like improve on in terms of like economic sustainability and moving up the value
上合组
chain
织天津峰
in those
会、
regards.
全球妇女峰会成功举办，海南自贸港全岛封关运作，为更好应对气候变化，我国宣布新一轮国家自主贡献。继三大倡议之后，我提出全球治理倡议，推动建设更加公正合理的全球治理体系。当今世界变乱交织，一些地区仍被战火笼罩，中国始终站在历史正确一边，愿同各国携手促进世界和平发展，推动构建人类命运共同体。前不久，我出席了全运会开幕式。
Yeah, China has consistently tried to China has consistently, been on the side of peace and stability. They've always called for an end to the uh Israeli extermination campaign in Gaza. They've called an end to the war, long-lasting peace and ceasefire. Not the U.S. backed, you know, the U.S. backed ceasefire where they just annex the entire territory and turn it into a condo for Trump. Um, Not in those regards. They don't support that type of lasting peace. They support peace in those regards. Especially in Ukraine, they called for, an end to the negotiation along with it was Brazil, I think too. Brazil also, one of China's partners, also involved in those peace talks. But China has always like been on the side of like diplomatically pushing towards peace in those regards. But China has obviously benefited from the war in Ukraine, has benefited from the war in Gaza, the Gaza Strip. The Israelis are getting Chinese drones to do technological surveillance. So that's like, economic ties between Israel and uh China, which honestly I wish China would just cut off all relations with Israel. I wish they would do that, but considering that China wants, trade maxing or whatever, trade surpluses and um trade integration between other countries, I can understand why they don't do that. They also, benefited from, I forgot how they benefited from the war in Sudan, but um I forgot how they did it, but I'm pretty sure they benefited from that war too in some way. But at least in terms of like diplomatically, like, they do push towards like peace in Ukraine, which, the US obviously rejects peace in Ukraine. Um and obviously reject peace in the Gaza Strip. Yeah, reject peace in Sudan. Uh but at least in terms of diplomatic purposes, at least China does, try to consistently push towards peace in those regards.
粤港澳三地同心同行，令人欣慰。要坚定不移贯彻“一国两制”方针，支持港澳更好融入国家发展大局，保持长期繁荣稳定。两岸同胞血浓于水，祖国统一的历史大势不可阻挡。党兴方能国强。我们开展深入贯彻中央8项规定精神学习教育，习目立信，从严管党治党，去腐生机， 推进自我革命，党风政风持续向好，要砥砺初心使命，持之以恒，久久为功，继续回答好延安窑洞之问，书写无愧于人民的时代答卷。2026年是十五开局之年，锐识者必图其中，成功者先记于始。我们要锚定目标任务，坚定信心，乘势而上，扎实推动高质量发展，进一步全面深化改革开放，推进全体人民共同富裕，续写中国奇迹新篇章。山海寻梦，不觉其远，前路迢迢，阔步而行。让我们拿出跃马扬鞭的勇气，激发万马奔腾的活力，保持马不停蹄的干劲，一起为梦想奋斗，为幸福打拼，把宏伟愿景变成美好现实。新年的旭日即将升起，祝祖国山河壮丽，大地丰饶，神州沐朝晖。祝大家心有所悦，业有所成，万事皆可期。
Yeah, basically it was just like, I think the purpose of this was basically to talk about China's achievements and where it's come since the revolution to now, to what, and talk about what the next, the 15 5-year plan is. But basically it's going to be what I said earlier. It's going to be focusing on reducing poverty, continuing to build up their AI capacity, stuff like that. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of achievements that China's had, and I think, well, I guess I could talk about Taiwan. I guess China and Taiwan, they don't want conflict with one another as of now. They don't want conflict with one another. Um, Taiwan wants to stay independent and try to like benefit from the U.S. intervening and benefit from China, working with Taiwan or whatever, but like TSMC, Taiwan Semi Manufacturing Conductors or whatever, conductors. Uh, they want to benefit from, neutral diplomacy. And China doesn't want to have to go to war over Taiwan. Frankly, the U.S., approving like that $11 billion weapons package to Taiwan, one of the biggest in U.S. history. That's big weapons. Taiwan is definitely like a big point of contention, especially since a significant point of leverage that can be used against China. I can understand why it's so serious to deal with, especially when we see what the U.S. is doing in Ukraine. I mean, they're just throwing Ukrainians into the meat grinder, throwing Ukrainians into the wind. I mean, Russia's killing the people, and they're like benefiting from the U.S. pushing for war and just the U.S. had no plans to end the war. That's why it's so hard for Donald Trump to end the war. They didn't have a plan to end the war. Their plan was to just deplete Russia's munitions by having Ukrainians fight Russians. So for the U.S. so that they could just destroy Russia's military capabilities, weaken the country at the expense of their allies, whatever. Obviously, that's what the U.S. would like to do with Taiwan. They would like to use Taiwan to deplete China's military capabilities, their economic, their freaking economic leaps and bounds, their their economic prosperity, and they would love to deplete that but obviously in the same way that they did in Ukraine with Russia. But Chinese leadership has obviously had no interest in going to war, at least now, at least not now. So could look at peace in the future, but it was a pretty good speech. It was a pretty good speech in many regards. I liked it a lot. It was pretty good.